Hey, what's going on? Walk-ins, welcome fam. You're back for another episode and we're glad you're here. We're having a great conversation today with Justin Mardjuki, and I'll let you do an intro in just a second, but I can't ever let an episode go by without saying we're here to help you get more patients, deliver better care, better experience.
I'm letting you see if you can
scale.
Do it.
No, I got it. I was going to see if you were going to hop in or not, man. I didn't know if you were going to hop in. You had the look of I'm about to hop in here.
No. So anyway, we're in interview season right now. We've had quite a few interviews going through our podcast in the past couple of months. It's just part of I think it's just the time of the year. And then, like I mentioned before, we're sailing past our 200th episode at this point. This is like number 204, maybe. Just moving right along. We're coming up to the end of the year, which is wild to think about that we're 2 weeks away from November, which means we're only 10 weeks away from Christmas.
That's right.
Which is kind of sad.
Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, it's a real reminder. Anyway, so let's get right into it. So this time we have Justin Mardjuki. He is the CEO of Savant. And in a nutshell, it's a clinical AI for acute care. It's a relatively new company, 1.5 years old. But you know what? If it's AI related,
it's already new.
As I say, any technology that's over 5 years old anyway is probably it needs to be updated. So he's bringing some new things to the table, and we're excited for it because at the end of the day, it helps our clinics become more efficient, become better at what they do, become better at being just a doctor, and just makes the whole experience at an urgent care better. So, Justin, so glad to have you on.
Justin, man, we are pumped to have you on the podcast today. Say hello to the Walk-ins Welcome family and tell us one thing about you that nobody else knows.
Thank you for having me, guys. Really excited to dig in today. One thing no one knows is maybe a dubious distinction, but my family and I accidentally set off a bomb threat at the Louvre back in 2002. Whoa. So, back before iPhone cameras, we were lugging around a bunch of digital cameras where the batteries wouldn't last so long. And my dad loved digital cameras, and Louvre's a big museum. He got tired halfway through one of the wings, left his bag, thought he'd come back for it. And next thing you know, all the sirens are blaring. They're pushing everybody out into the courtyard. And there are about 12 French policemen surrounding our backpack of digital cameras. And that put the fear of God into our family right quick.
Did you just pretend it wasn't my backpack and slowly walk away and be like, I don't know who that guy is?
No, we got that backpack back, and they made us prove that every camera still worked, and we got scolded out in French, and we're still alive to tell the tale.
If you haven't been that's what you should have led with, Justin, is I have been cussed out in French. And then you back out into the story. We're going to get you into a storyteller's episode here. Is
and the fact that
that's fantastic, by the way.
The fact that all that happened a year after 9/11 or a few months after 9/11. So it's just
there was default heightened awareness.
Yeah, there was a push there. And I was actually in Paris 2004, 2005. So I wasn't too far from that. But I get it. And I'm thinking through you can't have these darn batteries on airplanes and all this stuff. There are big pushes for that. And then recently we finally can leave our shoes on.
Oh yeah, that is new.
It only took 20 years, right, so we can put our shoes back on.
See, neither of y'all are old enough to remember when you could just walk straight up to the gate.
I can't imagine. That's where all the movies are from.
That's where I grew up. Yeah. You watch Home Alone. Well, look, we're not here to talk about Christmas movies, blowing up the Louvre, or more importantly, and most importantly, getting cussed out in French. That's the best part. All right, Justin, I want to hear all about Savant. Do me a favor and start off with a 10,000-foot view of what it is and how you're serving the urgent care community with it.
Absolutely. So Savant's a clinical AI solution for acute care. We do three things that help every clinician on shift. The first is we help reduce the documentation burden, right? Charting is a huge problem for every clinician who's staying late after shift to finish their charts. The second is documentation is not just about getting the chart done. It's about accurately reflecting the care that you've delivered and why you diagnose the patient a certain way, right? And there's actually a lot of clinical synthesis that goes into that chart, and we make sure that that's accurately reflected. And for the owners out there, we make sure that the charts are up to snuff from a coding and billing standpoint, right? Making sure that procedures, diagnoses, codes, all of those are accurately captured to drive maximal efficiency. So what we translate into is happier clinicians at the end of shift, happier patients because you actually carved that time away from the computer to make eye-to-eye contact with your patients, and happier owners because you're seeing improvements in your operational and financial efficiency.
Man, that's a strong layup of the product. Here's what I'm finding, and I'm interested if you're seeing the same thing. We're starting to see some AI fatigue out there, like because it's coming on so fast and so strong. There's almost no way to get away from it. And so because of that one reason, people are automatically kind of resistant to it, especially in the medical community.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's because they're afraid of it. I think they're just like, oh my God, another AI something or other.
Or which one should I go with now?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you battling that right now? Because well, one, are you experiencing it? I don't want to make the assumption. And then two, how are you overcoming that?
Yeah, I think you're definitely seeing. I think the hype around AI is inescapable, right? Everybody at every conference is talking about AI, slapping AI on things that maybe aren't even AI. And
Yes.
ultimately, what it comes down to for us is, are you actually making an impact on that patient outcome and that clinician's experience on shift, right? And if you're able to do that, it doesn't really matter what the technology is under the hood. It can be good old fashioned JavaScript code. It could be a large language model. It could be AI. It really doesn't matter. So for us, we lead with our outcomes and our workflow because we've been able to demonstrate now at over 100 sites of care, everything from an urgent care to freestanding ED to level 1 trauma center. Look, a clinician on shift with Savant versus one without, happier, more efficient with patients, improved patient outcomes, and improved billing, right? And you can see those results for yourself as an owner or as a director of a clinic with the first 500 patients or 1,000 patients. So that's the first thing we lead with is actual outcomes and separating ourselves from a lot of the hype of try this just because it's AI. The second thing is we're really built by acute care clinicians for acute care clinicians, right? So my background is in technology. I've lived and breathed healthcare for the last decade, but my co-founder's an emergency doc, right? We talk to hundreds of doctors and APPs every week, and being able to build a product that actually mirrors how they think about patients, all the little nitty gritty details of what hangs them up about their current systems. That's what we've built at Savant. And that's really the right home for AI, right? Is to offload as much of that mental tax as possible, all of those checklists that you have to go through for every patient that make you fatigued at the end of shift, and really improve quality of life for every clinician. So a bit of a long-winded answer, but that's how we lead in the market today.
That was a really strong answer. I love that because what it sounds like you're tackling is three of the highest priorities that our urgent care see. The first one being door-to-door times. Well, really, the first one being patient per day.
Mm-hmm.
The second one being the door-to-door time, trying to keep it under an hour, definitely down to 45 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the third being the net promoter score. And I would say one is just uncontrollable, that you sound like you have a way to kind of address that to a degree, and that is the financials as well as coding it correctly the first time so you get paid the maximum amount of money. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. So how is this making the experiences more human instead of less human?
So think about a patient coming into an urgent care today, right? You're out in the waiting room for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. You maybe tell your story to the medical assistant up front. When you get back to the room, oftentimes that APP is especially during cold and flu season, you might be the 20th patient they've seen that day, right? And they're buried behind the computer and they're asking, and when did it start? And how long have you had that cough? And how long have you had the fever, right? And as they're doing that, they're clicking through all the checkboxes in their EMR system to get the chart done. And that's not face-to-face time with the patient, right? And so there's a tendency, especially when urgent cares get busy, right, to try to move on to the next patient as quickly as possible. That's natural from an efficiency perspective. But for that patient that's feeling sick and is probably having a pretty bad day, right, that 3 to 5 minutes of time with the clinician and being able to actually do that face to face, and for that patient to share, hey, it's not actually just the cold, but I've also been having severe shoulder pain and I can't lift my shoulder, right? All of the secondary diagnoses that often get missed in this machine of get in and get out, right? That's how you can bring some of the human element back to medicine. And so we hear all the time from both clinicians and patients that, wow, from a patient experience perspective, right, I'm actually getting care from my doctor now because they're spending time with me. I'm getting discharge instructions that explain in very clear English what I came in with and what I'm supposed to do next, instead of my standard sheaf of discharge instructions based on ICD-10 codes. And the doctor and the clinician's happier because they're saying, well, this is why I went to medicine in the first place, right? We have doctors that say, look, I didn't go into medicine to take care of a computer. Somehow over the last 20 years, that's what my job has become, right? And Savant allows me to go back to why I was excited to enter medicine in the first place.
So good.
I mean, that to me, it seems like an obvious reason to go to do this, right? Like, I'm trying to understand. I mean, you can help me understand, why would someone say, I just don't believe in this, or I have a lack of confidence in it, or I'm nervous about it? Because we hear the nervous part quite a bit on AI as well, where they're just kind of nervous. And maybe it's a compliance thing. Like, they're nervous, like if this tool, if any AI tool messes up, it's on them to take the brunt of it if something happens. What do you find to be the most common, like, pushback on the confidence side, or just like, I'm just don't want to do this?
I think for better, for worse, right? Healthcare is a peer review industry, right? That's how we get drugs. That's how we get new interventions. And even for non-clinical tasks, right? It takes a lot of peer momentum to drive change in healthcare. I mean, take dragon dictation, right? 30 years ago, doctors were writing their charts by speaking into a phone, and there was a transcriptionist in the basement, right? Dragon dictation has been out for 20 years almost at this point. And Kaiser published a study a couple of years ago that showed that adoption of Dragon compared to typing was still only at 60% across Kaiser, right? And you think about that over 15 years. And so there's just an immense change management, apprehension to change in certain, in certain parts of healthcare. And I think, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? You don't want a clinician changing the way they do laceration repairs every month. But I think when it comes to adopting new technology, right, it's really not, at least our perspective is, it's not just, hey, here's new technology, go and adopt it, see if you like it or not, right? But it's actually understanding, okay, what's your current workflow? How do we fit into that in the least disruptive way possible to to be successful together? And it's really not one size fits all, right? It's different clinician to clinician, it's different site to site, it's different EMR to EMR. And so I think that's really, the last mile problem that no amount of AI is going to be able to solve for you.
Well, and we find that when we talk to a lot of doctors, there is a high level of loyalty to whatever they're currently doing. Like, it's not even like, I don't want to change. It's more like, this is what I do, and
it's almost like there's ego attached to it.
Possibly because we have an episode, very recent one, about you need to get rid of your internal person that's causing damage, and we made that episode because we've come across many people that were extremely loyal to someone because they've been there since day one, and they're afraid to make the change, and it's hard. They're afraid. There's a fear of the brashness of a change, right? Like, is it going to result in bad things and all that stuff? So, and I just find, like, even we joke about we have like the shortest contracts when it comes to vendors in the urgent care space. So you go talk to an X-ray vendor, they're like 10-year contracts,
right?
And so it's like there's like this mindset, everything is very long term in their mind, which is not a bad thing, I think. But I think that's the part that's been a challenge. Like, well, yeah, I've been doing this the same way for 5-7 years. Why do I need to change again? It seems to have been working fine for me. And so I don't know, it's such an interesting thing. And I think with your background, because your background's very deep in the tech side, like, we're just kind of in awe, like, you worked at Box and all the different things like that. And so you are on the other side of that, like, how fast can we move tech along? Because if we fall behind, we're going to fall behind and fall apart. So I imagine, like, the push, like, it's probably like, hey, we want to move forward, and they're like, well, not yet.
Well, I'll give you a really specific example, right? There's lots of things that our team is building. Some of it is, of course, frontier level AI models that improve chart quality, that improve recommendations to a clinician, right? And that's the core of Savant. But we have a list that we're working through, which is the list of reasons that clinicians rage quit Savant, or when we go and shadow in person, right? What are the reasons why someone hovers over a screen for too long, or you see something happen that's unnatural? And I think, our job as a technology solution is to make that as easy as possible for someone to adopt. And so it's not on the onus shouldn't be on the clinician to say, hey, you've got to put down everything that's working pretty well for you, right? Because you've already been in business and successful for a decade here, and drop everything you're doing and switch over to this new model, right? That's never going to work. The way we're successful is we say, look, let's go through with the medical director together. Where do you feel like you're losing money or operational efficiency today? Okay, common example that every urgent care director will tell me is NIST-CPT codes, right? Dressing applications, splint applications. Today, the way they try to fix that problem is an endless series of webinars or clinician meetings to say, hey, we've missed 32 splint applications this month, right? How do we get that up? What if instead of saying, hey, try new technology, it's, hey, this is a solution that's going to help us solve this very specific problem if you try it on your first 3 to 5 shifts, right? And seeing is believing for every clinician. So, we really pride ourselves on the fact that if you get a clinician to use Savant on 3 to 5 shifts and they hit this magic number, which is between 50 and 100 charts, you start to rewire your muscle memory, right? It's like changing your free throw routine, right? Whatever you're doing is already seared into your muscle memory. It feels natural, and it's going to take some time to change how you do that. But once you get up the other side, you look back a month, and you're like, wow, I can't believe there's ever a time that I practiced without Savant, right? And so you have to, a lot more in the adoption challenge in healthcare is about getting buy-in and belief from the clinician to take a bet on you for those first 3 to 5 shifts, as much as it is about making technology that actually works. And I think, you see a lot of vendors fail where they spend 95% or 100% of their time building this technology castle, right? But you make it really hard for people to adopt, and it almost doesn't matter how good that solution is.
I love that you said it that way. I think professionals at this point are looking for the lowest barrier of entry with the highest return on either investment or return on time, right? One of those two different things. So part of that is making sure that I'm not having to switch my EMR to accommodate this one thing, or I'm not having to change my online schedule to accommodate this new thing over here. And
how much do I have to rip out to put this in?
Exactly. Like, am I going to have to rebuild everything that I have from scratch to do this? How does Savant tie into all of the existing systems?
So for that reason, what we say is, look, the best way to know if Savant's going to be a good fit for you is to take it for a test drive, right? Go find 3 to 5 clinicians across your sites and have them each run 100 charts. We're going to have 500 charts to look at together. You can do this fully unintegrated, right? So to start, you can copy and paste the final notes back into your EMR of choice. We can customize all the templates to make it easy to conform with your current standards, right? So for some sites, they see enough in 10 days and they say, I've seen enough. Let's get it out to everybody, right? Other sites will take 3 months, 6 months to let that data mature, actually see the improvement in charges, see the improvement in chart quality, see a reduction in late charts before making that plunge. And so it's really a crawl, walk, run approach, right? The crawl is start with a small cohort of folks using the solution, no systems integration required. You're not having to rip anything out. Step 2 is which pieces of your current stack do you want to integrate, right? We support integration with all of your major EMRs. And so we make it really easy for Savant to be in the environments that you're used to being in every day. And then the third is there are going to be these opportunities where you're going to take what was probably a very manual chart review process or a painful review for the medical director or you as an owner, right? And how do you start building that into Savant? But all of that is not going to happen overnight.
We're starting to see a lot of the main players in the EMR game taking a stab at building this into their systems, right? I tend to lean on the side of be an expert in what you do and let other people be an expert in what they do and build bridges and build friendships that way. Some people want to be the all-in-one solution. It looks like
HubSpot.
HubSpot in the marketing.
HubSpot in the marketing is like the best example of this.
Yeah. But with that, why would somebody want to not use the baked in software and use yours? Help me differentiate the two.
Yeah. So look, I think anybody with a ChatGPT license today can do a little science experiment, which is drop in something that looks like a patient conversation and try to turn it into a chart, right? So you're going to get something that looks like a chart. I think a lot of the EMR vendors are going to offer this functionality because it's expected now, right? It's being widely adopted. But the last 10, 20%, whatever you want to call it, of how to take something that resembles a chart to actually make that clinically defensible, aligning with all of the standards of care at your site for risky presentations and all the reasons why you're incurring med mal risk today, and all the reasons why you have missed ancillaries, you have E&M downcoding, right? There's a level of specificity around how you operate your sites today that an EMR vendor is not really interested, frankly, in encapsulating, right? And so I think there's a huge gulf in chart quality, and we put our money where our mouth is. We say, look, let's run A/B tests, right? You feed the same transcript or dictation from a clinician into Savant and your tool of choice. And we've been vetted over and over again, whether it's by fully blinded third-party med mal risk boards, right? People that actually look at cases that go to suit every day. There's an 80% preference in that group for Savant chart versus non-Savant chart, right? And so that's where I think this market is going, right? Things that look, an EMR at one point, right, was a novel idea, and now everybody has one.
Right.
None of these required, right?
Yeah. Now it's required. You can't have the
that's right.
files anymore.
That's right. And so if you look at where we're at on the evolution curve of AI at the point of care for a clinician, there's a lot of hype, but it's still relatively early as far as adoption goes. And it's really rare if you ask around, well, hey, you piloted AI last year. What percentage of your clinicians are actually using that solution today? And for most solutions, what you'll hear is, oh yeah, we've got one guy. He really liked that solution. He's still using it. The rest of the group stopped using it, right? Our goal as Savant is, how do you make it so indispensable to the workflow that you don't want to go on shift without Savant, which is what we hear from clinicians now, right? Every single patient coming through touches Savant, and everybody has a different reason for using it. Some folks want to do it for the charting benefits, some want to do it for the patient experience benefits, but that's ultimately, I think, how we want to set ourselves apart from a kind of default offering, let's call it, from your EMR.
That's good.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because you touched on it just a little bit, but so, I mean, you've been in the tech world for quite a while. You've been with big tech companies. You have this company. Where do you think AI is truly going? Like pie in the sky? This is because in my mind, like, I feel like the ideal situation is where there is no, a doctor can just see you, do the things, and then you walk out and things have been paid for, things have been documented, things have been submitted, and there was no interaction by any human to make that happen. How far away is that real? Is that like a utopian thought, or is that something that you actually foresee happening in the next couple of years? It's just going to take some time to get piloted in. Because we had an urgent care once that had a Vegas location that was, there was no doctor. And so there would be one person just to make sure somebody wouldn't break the building, right? Or break into the building. And they would go in and they would set them into an exam room with a screen to talk to a doctor. And there was like no interaction. And I was like, that's a little far for me. Like, I feel like that's kind of a little much. But
like what we're doing right now.
Yeah, right. Like this, like the entire, like we would go to a building, which is a shell of screens, basically. Yeah. And so where's the line of sci-fi movie and reality? Where do you see it actually going in 3 to 5 years? Because obviously it can change again. And, if we decide to have another COVID type situation, it could ramp it back up real quick. Who knows? But where do you think it's going? Like, legitimately?
It's the $1 trillion question. Well, look, I've been building in healthcare with AI for 10 years, and we were taking what was very bad natural language processing models 10 years ago, right? And trying to force them into the level of compliance and performance that you need for healthcare. And obviously today, compared to where we were 10 years ago, is like a totally different world as far as what you can enable with AI. I think if you fast forward 5 years, right, there's a few things that are definitely going to happen. The first is documentation has risen out of the increasing complexity of the relationship between the provider and the payer, right? And there's an arms race going on, right? Providers are adopting AI to improve their outcomes. The payers are adopting AI and very well publicized. I won't name names, but there are a lot of automated chart review systems that have been landing in a lot of hot water on the payer side as of late, right? And you think about what's happening on the documentation side. And I think one thing that's going to be true is that's going to be a fully automated process in the next 5 years, right? There's less and less coders, there's less and less scribes. There's vendors like Savant that are trying to decrease as much of that documentation burden for the purposes of administration on behalf of the clinician. And so I think this idea that you can actually have a face-to-face conversation with your doctor and they're not documenting anything. The labs and orders are being placed as they're talking, right? The doctor is getting pinged about any kind of abnormal lab values that's coming back, right? That's coming in the next few years. I don't think that's a 5 year, that's a 2 year kind of trajectory.
Right.
But in 5 years, I think one thing I'm really excited about is if you look at all of the models like GPT-5 and the newest Anthropic models, right? They are hoovering up as much data as they possibly can. And they're not being especially picky about where that data is coming from. So for healthcare, what that means is you're going to need an army of folks that actually understand in painful detail the workflow for an urgent care versus an oncologist versus an emergency department versus an inpatient stay, and be able to boost an individual clinician's workflow to the point where the AI knows what they need to do in about 90% of the time, right? So I don't see a world where it's all fully AI doctors, but I do see a world where a doctor's job is to ultimately review and approve care plans as opposed to trying to remember the 1,500 guidelines around medication dosing that they learned 15 years ago and they have to look up, once a week. And I think that's where, that's the vision that Savant is building towards, right? Is how do you not replace the clinician in the driver's seat, but how do you put enough help around them that they feel truly empowered to sit down with you and understand what's happening and ultimately drive better outcomes.
I think if there was an AI that was available at this moment that I think everybody would buy into, would be some type of AI that would be an automatic payer negotiator tool that would do on-the-fly negotiations constantly with the payer for the best payouts. Because that's like our number. Like, what's your biggest complaint? Reimbursements. Like, well, let's talk about that.
Well, United and Aetna and all of those are coming back with one that negotiates it down.
Yeah. That's just like a battle of negotiations.
Yeah. I mean, one very concrete example that stuck with me is, I think social determinants of health are something that have been kind of a buzzword that's fell off to the wayside, right? Everybody knows they're important. Everybody knows that they're one of the largest drivers of healthcare outcomes, but they've been reduced to something in your documentation, right, for billing purposes. And what it boils down to is, well, the reason why it mattered in the first place is if you can't identify that a patient is going to have trouble paying for their medications for that copay after they leave your urgent care, it almost doesn't matter what the care plan is that you gave them, right? And whether it was 90% accurate or 100% accurate. And so from a reimbursement perspective, absolutely, the social determinants of health should have been considered in your medical decision-making, right? And that will have an impact on your E&M level, like everybody knows. But what's really important is, did you take those 30 seconds with the patient to say, and what's your preferred pharmacy? And this is a copay that should cost about $10. Are you going to have any issues paying for that, right? And that's that moment of bringing the human back to patient care that I think is all wrapped up in this reimbursement equation. And so there's no perfect answers, right? But I do think that there are these win-win-wins where you can take these concepts that have unfortunately been distilled down to just reimbursement focus and pull them back to say, well, wait a minute. Why did we as an industry even care to talk about this problem 10 years ago? And how do we solve that root cause problem? And yes, it'll have all of the downstream impact we care about from a reimbursement operational perspective.
You're not kidding about the care plan versus the ability to afford the care plan. My wife has a heart condition, and it is comical where her cardiologist would say, well, we want to do this, this, and this. And we're like, you realize how many copays you're talking about right now? Because like every time I see a doctor for 15 seconds, it just costs me $85. Like, and why are we meeting again? And I get it, because like the doctor wants this to be the best outcome for the patient, and they're not thinking about how much it costs, because it's not their focus. And so, and but it's real. Like there's a reason why people cancel appointments, because they don't want to pay for it as well. So
yeah, I mean, I learned that lesson at my last company, LifeLink. We did a lot of work with specialty pharma manufacturers, right? And these are rare disease drugs, extremely expensive drugs with high copays, right? And if you think about the journey that a patient had to go on to even get to the point where they're speaking to the specialist about getting onto one of these specialty drugs, right? They're already out thousands of dollars and a lot of pain to get to that point. And then you put up 10 more hoops for them to jump through, right? To even understand what their copay will be. And meanwhile, their doctor's saying, well, I prescribed them the drug, and it seems like they didn't get on it. And that's an adherence problem, right? And so I think adherence has also bubbled up to be one of those things, which is care plan adherence is actually 108 different problems, right? That are all tied into patient comprehension and all of the administrative hoops and financial complications that make it really hard for a patient to take what is a very one size fits all, hey, go do this, right, and actually follow through with that plan.
I think, honestly speaking, there was a comedian that came out not too long ago that was going through our channels in Slack, and the comedian was making this.
It was funny.
He was comparing urgent cares to an oil change, and I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. Where an urgent care will sit there and they'll tell you what's wrong, and then you have to leave the urgent care to go get the medication to solve the problem. And that's like going to get an oil change, and they say, yep, you need an oil change. Now go over to Walmart and get your oil.
Go get your oil.
And
we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Like it makes absolutely no sense why they separate a pharmacy from a clinic. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Like I know that's an industry. I'm sure there's a lot of laws around that. I'm sure there's money around that. But it's exactly what you just talked about, and that we can solve all the problems here. But if they never take action on the problem that we just solved for, they're not going to get better anyway.
Yeah.
I still have
absolutely.
a prescription sitting over at Publix that I haven't picked up from Monday.
And you
To
go
give you
too
some
long, you'll be
example.
canceled.
Yeah, exactly. I'll ask Tether to pick it up on the way home. But to tell a real quick story, and then we can wrap up. But it's relevant to Savant in that I've been in doctor after doctor after doctor here recently. I had my primary care this week, and then over the weekend I had to go to an orthopedic urgent care because I hurt myself. But that being said, my experience with my primary care, she rolled a cart with a computer on it.
Same.
And had a mask, which is fine. I don't care about the mask. The point is like that all I could see was her eyes.
Yep.
And that's the point I'm making, is her eyes were on that screen the whole time asking me questions. I'm over here and she's just typing stuff in, and she'll ask me a question and type stuff in. She was nice, don't get me wrong, but she looked at me about of that 15 minutes I was in there twice maybe. And then she came in, like, checked my chest or whatever.
Yeah.
The orthopedic urgent care, when I hurt my leg, they took x-rays and everything. They took those x-rays, they uploaded it into their Savant, and that gave them an analysis of what it saw. When the doctor came into the room, he had this little thing, like an iPad situation, where he sat it down on the table across from me, and he was engaged with me the whole time. He was touching my leg. He was moving it. He was asking me questions. He was looking me in the eye. Everything was being dictated over here. And he never took a single note and knew exactly what he needed to give me by the time we were done. And all of that was being charted automatically. And that, to me, is the difference in how AI made a more human experience.
Yeah.
And Savant made a more human experience
Mm-hmm.
instead of a less human experience. And so AI needs to be a thought partner, not the leader. And if you think of it that way, then you have an assistant with you all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we had a doctor reach out because there's a small but growing Uzbek population where they live, and
Okay.
for the for the duration of the visit, they called in the medical interpreter on the phone, right, and they were collecting the patient's history, and you know Savant can actually listen in on that conversation between the patient and the doctor. And what was really interesting is when you're using an interpreter service, right, they're summarizing what they believe are the key details.
Right.
And when Savant went and generated that chart, there were additional details that weren't listed by the interpreter, right? And that's part of that active listening that Savant enables a clinician to do. And at the end of the visit, instead of printing out your standard discharge instruction, right, we can generate discharge instructions in 30 plus languages. And so we were able to generate these very specific discharge instructions personalized to that patient that they were able to sit down in Uzbek and English, right, and share it with their family. And the doctor said, that's amazing. That's the reason why I use Savant, is it makes me better at my job, and it helps me accomplish and reach out to my patients in ways that I never could have before. And those are the kinds of reasons of why we built this company.
It doesn't get much better of a description than that. I love the human side of that on the other end.
Oh, yeah.
You made mention earlier that it's a crawl, a walk, and then a run. So if somebody wants to crawl with you for a minute and learn more about Savant and how to just experience the software, what's the best way for them to connect with you in the software?
So they should feel free to reach out to me directly, Justin at Savant, SAYVANT.com, or hello@savant.com. You can find us on our website and schedule a demo, but we can get started tomorrow. Get a few clinicians set up. Seeing is believing, right? And let's go do a chart audit together. I think that's the fastest way to start understanding how AI can impact your practice and your outcomes.
Love it. All right, so we're going to drop your LinkedIn in the show notes. Obviously, we'll link to the website.
Yep.
When you say a demo, what is the risk involved in the demo?
Zero risk.
Love it.
Come on, spend 20 minutes with us. If you live and breathe urgent cares, you will understand what Savant is doing within 3 minutes of this demo, I promise. And you can decide, right, whether this is something that you have the bandwidth to try in the next few months.
Love it.
Nice.
All right, there you have it. So we've been having a great conversation with, I'm going to say Justin Mardjuki, and I think I got it right. I think I nailed it. Okay, good. He's got a cool last name. Mine is terrible, but that's another time. Hey, thank you for coming on with us and explaining the software and how it can impact in a positive way urgent cares. We really appreciate you being on with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. All right, take us out.
All right, guys. Thank you again for listening to us, and we'll catch you on the next one.
All right, we'll see you.